This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason. So glad that you tuned into our show today. And I'm really excited about our guest, Olivia Ancil. And I'll introduce you to Olivia in just a second. But before we get to that, I want to tell you a couple places that we want to direct you to. The first is our website. Make sure you check that out, sportspectrum.com. It has all of our content, every podcast in the podcast network, as well as articles, stories, and devotionals, all available right there at sportspectrum.com. And then you can email me if you have a story idea, a show idea, a guest that you want us to interview on the show. You can email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. And that's exactly what happened with our guest today, Olivia Ancil. So back in October of 2020, I received an email from a guy named Mark Weinstein, who works with Cedarville University. He's their executive director of public relations. And I've had connections with Cedarville multiple times. You know, my buddy Hembo went to college there, who I worked with at ESPN. And so I'm a big fan of Cedarville and certainly the message that they portray at their college and glorifying God. And Mark sent me this email telling me the story of Olivia Ancil. Olivia actually is now Olivia Arent, A-R-E-N-T. But at the time of our taping, she was Olivia Ancil, and I'll explain that on the back end of the interview. But Olivia is a former Cedarville University tennis player, and played Division II tennis there. She graduated from the School of Nursing at Cedarville in 2019 and was serving as a float nurse at Holland Hospital in Holland, Michigan. But that's not Olivia's story, and that's part of her story, certainly. But it's what took place on May 28th, 2020 that makes this story absolutely incredible. Olivia and her boyfriend, Alex Arent, were struck by a speeding vehicle going 70 miles an hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone while they were simply taking a walk. That's all I'm going to say. This conversation is a powerful one, and Olivia is one brave soul who's trusting in Jesus. Take a listen to our conversation with Olivia Ancil, the former Cedarville tennis player, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Olivia, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Good. I'm glad that you're here. So awesome to talk to you as we head from 2020 into 2021. It's been quite the year for you. Before we get into everything that's taken place in 2020, let's say from May on, let's learn about Olivia before May 28th, 2020. You're a former Cedarville tennis player and you're a nurse as well, right?
Yes, I sure am. I was at Cedarville for 4 years and played on their NCAA Division II team for all 4 years and absolutely loved it. Have always played tennis growing up. So yeah.
So nursing too, you always wanted to be a nurse? Is that something from when you were a kid, or did you kind of discover that in college?
Decided later on. It was just senior year of high school. I was trying to figure out what in the world I wanted to do and just landed on nursing. I was deciding between a few different options, and I really liked the idea of helping people and being able to do that through healthcare. I was very interested in it, and so it kind of was the only thing I didn't knock out of the options.
So what was that like, transitioning from college to be a float nurse, I think was what the term was, at Holland Hospital over in Michigan? What was that like to kind of graduate and then go into the real world? And I'm imagining this is pre-COVID, but it's still pretty eye-opening, some of the things that you're going through and seeing there.
For sure. A float nurse basically is where you're floating between all the inpatient units. And so I was working on med-surg floors, the ICU telemetry floor, spinal orthopedic floors, everything. And so you're kind of going wherever you're needed the most. And so I really liked it because it was kind of giving you the opportunity to do more things and learn more and see more, get to meet more people too. And so I loved it. Yeah.
That's awesome. So tennis, does that start for you when you're like a little girl? Is that something you took a liking to at a very young age?
I think I started in first grade. It was me, my sister, and a best friend, and we had a coach growing up, and we always had our lessons with him, and then started to get more involved in like high school. So
what as far as heroes? Did you have like a tennis hero? Like, was there a couple players that you really took a liking to?
I mean, you just gotta go for the classic Roger Federer.
Oh, that works. That's. I mean, if you're gonna pick someone, you might as well pick the best, right?
He's the best, and he always has a very classy attitude. So I always like respected him.
That's good. So Cedarville is a Christian university. This is a Christian podcast, sports and faith show that we do here at Sports Spectrum. So let's intersect the conversation with faith. Tell us about Jesus becoming a part of your life and where that, took shape, and maybe your testimony.
Yeah. Well, I guess from the very beginning, I accepted Christ into my heart at the age of 4. And so I can't remember what it's been like with a life before Christ. He's always been a part of my life. I grew up in a Christian home, grew up homeschooled, so I was very sheltered, and my parents raised me well, raised me in the faith and going to church. And I was just always very involved in those kind of things. So faith has always been very important to me. But I would say it wasn't until high school, college, but then like it really started to become my own and not just me following after my parents. Going to Cedarville really changed my faith a lot. Being able to be part of the tennis team, being with the nursing, such amazing professors and everything, coaches, who really pointed me to the Lord and directed me in my faith. So
you said it changed your faith a lot. How so? Tell me some of the ways that it changed.
Specifically with the tennis, the first thing that comes to my mind is that our coaches and as a team, like we really prioritized playing for a purpose that was greater than the game, greater than just the game of tennis. And so something that we like decided to do, I don't think it was my freshman year. I think we actually started it like my sophomore or junior year. We made it as an intention to personally pray and then pray as a team after each of our matches with our opponents, which very much so humbles you, because if you win or you lose, kind of getting yourself in the mindset to pray and focus on something greater than just tennis itself, it really changes you. And then we'd also like write notes to all of our opponents. So just like that whole mindset, we really prioritized it a lot. And I'm so thankful for my coaches and for my team that, like I said, it was kind of a team cumulative effort that we all really focused on. And it was really powerful.
So what went into the decision to choose Cedarville?
My sister is like 19 months older than me. She went to Cedarville. So we're from Michigan. And so obviously it's a little drive away because in Ohio, Cedarville is. And so it was kind of through my sister. And I visited a few different schools, but Cedarville just stood out to me so much. Like they prioritize faith so much, and other like Christian universities and stuff, Value Chapel and incorporating faith into classes and everything. But going to Cedarville and everything, like their chapel's 5 days a week, just meeting their coaches and everything, like it was constantly part of the conversation and not just kind of an added on feature. So that you could tell that it was the heart of the university, which I loved.
That's awesome. Olivia Ancil is joining us here on Sports Spectrum. So 2020 was obviously the craziest year of any of our lives, just being alive, but then it gets even crazier for you. And it'll be obviously the year that you'll never forget for a lot of probably some good reasons in there, but for a lot of really difficult reasons as well. So let's set the stage here. If we're telling the story of what took place on May 28th, 2020, let's set the stage, maybe, where you were in life a couple days before, whatever, and then take us to what happened.
Yeah. Well, I started as a nurse in, I think it was August of 2019. And so the accident happened May 28, 2020. And so I was kind of approaching my first year of nursing. So it was kind of unfortunate because I was just starting to finally feel comfortable, and I was like, I got this, I can do it. And so I was just starting to get into kind of the groove of what nursing would look like. And I'd actually just turned 22 on May 17. And so I was just newly 22 for a couple of weeks. Yeah. And then everything kind of changed.
Everything changed. So tell me what happened on May 28th. Is you're going for a walk, just a simple walk with your boyfriend, right?
Yep. We were just walking. It was actually near the hospital where I worked in West Michigan. And we were just on the sidewalk walking where you think you'd be safe. It was like at 5 p.m., 5:40 maybe, I think it was. And so normal time, when you wouldn't expect anything wrong to happen. We were just walking on the sidewalk, and it was a 35-mile-per-hour zone, and we were hit by a car on the sidewalk, and the car was going around 70. There's a lot of things with the legal stuff that I'm not allowed to say, but
Sure.
There is significant evidence that the car was drag racing with another car, and it sped up from a light. And that's when then they escalated up to going 70. There was a car that turned in front, and in order to avoid that car, the car then turned and veered onto the sidewalk where we were walking.
So as we're recording this is about 7 months, I guess, 6 months from the accident. And I'm wondering, there's so many questions that you can have following up from just hearing that, right? The first one, I guess, would be, what happened? So were you flown, were you hit, and did you guys like take, were you hit and then you landed 30 feet away? Like what happened after you were hit?
We would have been, like I said, we were hit on the sidewalk, and we would have been hit from behind. We didn't see the car coming or anything. So
okay.
In a way, I'm thankful for that, because I don't have any like flashbacks, or I don't have any memory of it, which is a blessing. But we would have been hit from behind, and our bodies would have, flown to the side. We were very close to hitting a building, actually, which could have changed the accident and our recovery quite a lot. And so thankful that we didn't hit it, but landed in some landscaping. So.
At what point do you have memory of what took place? So do you have the memory of being hit, or is not even there? Not
at all. Me and my boyfriend that were hit too, we both had what were called severe TBIs. It's a traumatic brain injury. And so due to the severity of it, neither of us remember anything at all from the accident. I don't remember really anything from immediately prior to the accident. I don't have any memory of my week in the ICU. I don't have any memory until about a month after being Mary free bed, going through rehab. That's a rehab hospital. And so, it's not until like a month following the accident that I start having bits and pieces of information that I'm like, oh, I kind of remember that, And
now you're probably, as you tell me and the audience that's listening to this, the story, a lot of it probably stems from people telling you the story, right? Because you don't remember it. So they're telling you what happened to you.
Yeah, nothing is from my own memory. It's all been what's legally, like I said, it's been recorded and documented, and what's been told to me by witnesses and doctors and the first
Amazing.
responders.
So you mentioned traumatic brain injury for both you and for Alex. There was a lot more, though. There was a lot of injuries that you sustained, weren't there? Can you share a little bit about what those injuries were?
Yeah, severe traumatic brain injury. That was kind of the main thing, like mentally and emotionally, personally, that affected, obviously. Physical injuries, spinal fracture. I think it's called a compression fracture. So I had to get that, a surgery with my back. My tibia and fibula were both broken in both legs. And so I have a bunch of metal in both lower legs.
Wow.
My mandible was broken, so I have metal there too. It was basically split in two, and so they had to completely meld it back together. I think I had a lung contusion, rib fractures. I'm drawing a blank. Lots of skin.
That's a lot.
Problems and stuff. Lots of stuff. My third cranial nerve was severely damaged. That's why I have a problem with vision. I have double vision and other sight problems. And so that's kind of the main thing too. And lots of other things I'm probably forgetting too. So,
well, that's a lot. I mean, you and I were talking before we started recording. You said you spent 72 days in the hospital and rehab, which is basically the entire summer between the end of May until sometime in mid-August. So take me through coming to, because you guys, they said, I'm going backwards here, but that you were told that you guys were critical, right? There was a good chance, there's a possibility you might not make it, right?
Yes. There was actually an officer that came out to the scene, and his job title is strictly just to investigate fatalities. He was called out to the scene and investigated the whole site, figured out things. We were both assumed to pass. The whole first responder team, they've met with us talking about things, and they basically knew that we were not going to make it. And they were, as a team, they were frustrated because they were like, they felt so confident about that they did everything they could. Nobody felt like they messed up or made any mistakes. Like they truly felt like they executed their job so well. Yet they kind of knew that it wasn't going to end well for us. And so they really struggled with that. But yeah, nobody thought that both of us were going to make it, let alone even one of us. And yeah.
And here you are, you both made it. So obviously doctors did amazing work, but then there's the healing power of God, right? And obviously playing a big role. What was that like, being in the hospital and being in that rehab center for almost 3 months, and just kind of understanding, like you said, it was a month after you were really in there that you started to piece together like what had happened and then it wasn't a good thing. What was
Yeah.
that like?
I'm very thankful because I've been told by so many people, like when I was in the rehab hospital, so many nurses and techs would come up to me and they'd be like, you have that therapist or you have that doctor. He's the best one. She's the best one. Like they would all tell me that. And so I truly believe we were surrounded by such an incredible team that came together to give us the best possible care. And I think too, like as a nurse, I was like so intrigued by it all too. And so like just kind of being on the flip side of healthcare, kind of seeing what it looks like to be a good nurse, because like it's always to me like been so important and stuff, but it's like seeing physically, personally on the other side of it being like that nurse is so good. Like she really does invest in me and she cares about me and she's trying to encourage me versus other ones, not necessarily they did anything wrong, but they were just trying to kind of get the job done and didn't go that extra step. And like, even in my mental state that was so altered, like I even still understood that basic of, I really like that nurse and that one, maybe not as much, you know? And so it makes me like have that greater motivation and everything. And like, as a Christian, even more so, like what it looks like to not just do the job that you're supposed to do, no matter what your career is, but to kind of go that extra mile and what that looks like.
I have to imagine the support, the outpouring of support must have been incredible. Some that you probably still don't even understand or comprehend, the amount of people that were probably praying for you and just trying to walk through this whole situation with not just you, because it becomes a family situation too, right? It's not just affecting you, it's affecting your parents, it's affecting your sister and everyone, right?
Oh yeah. And I think it's been so overwhelming to see the vast amount of support. Like Mary Freeba took notice of like, I mean, every day, like I was at the hospital, I mean, 72 days at a single place, and literally like every single day, like a low day of cards would be like 8 to 10, like the higher days were closer to 20 cards. And
wow,
it's like every day the, person would be delivering them. Olivia, you got some more today. And so it was so neat to see. And I don't know, even that gives me a greater motivation too, to like be that person that encourages people going through difficult times, because it can mean so much.
Olivia Ancil is joining us here on Sports Spectrum, sharing her powerful story with us here on the show today. Let me ask you about your faith during this, because I don't know what that's like. I've never had a traumatic injury. We've had trauma in our, in different walks and spheres of our life with different people. And you always try to say, God's got a plan. I trust in God. And yet, like, this is really not a great plan, God. Like, I don't want to go through this. What were some of the emotions that you allowed yourself to kind of feel and process in your relationship with God as you walked through the rehab aspect of what you were trying to do and heal and recover?
Yeah. I truly am so thankful. I feel like God protected me so much, because I can truly say like not even one time out of the entire, like the months I'm still in of recovery, not one time have I ever gone into like a state of depression or severe anxiety. Like I've not experienced any of that at all, which I have only God to thank, because I know that's like natural human nature, to go into that kind of state. And so I'm very thankful that that's something I've not had to go through and to process. Don't get me wrong, there's been days that have been hard and tough. There's been lots of challenges, and it's frustrating, but at the same time, I'm so thankful to be where I'm at. And like, I think that the biggest lesson I've learned is like, no matter what the circumstance is that's coming your way, like God is faithful and good regardless of the trial that comes your way. It's like I've always believed in faithfulness and the goodness of God, and who He is in His character, in that. And yet, when you're faced with such a tragic circumstance, like anything can kind of flood your mind, and just kind of realizing like it's not about me. God is again so good, so faithful, and I think that that's like truly the message that I held on to like during the entire time. And just the fact that like He's a miracle worker, He's a savior, He's good, He's faithful, and holding on to those truths, I think really changed my whole mindset every day. Like I said, it's like my mindset was probably brought down to like a preschooler. I could not understand really anything at all. And yet I could understand, okay, this is painful. I'm feeling pain right now, but God is good. It's like I could understand that. And
Wow.
like I held on to it. So.
Wow. I think it's C.S. Lewis that says God whispers to us in the good parts of our life, but he screams and shouts in the trauma and the difficult times in those valleys. Did you kind of feel that like closer? It's weird to even ask you that because you're still trying to process, trying to recover, but did you feel closer to God in the midst of trying to recover here during that time?
Oh, definitely. I don't know. I can't even, like I said, I can't even put a word to it. But it definitely changed like my whole mindset and everything. It's like, it's easy to quote unquote believe like who God is. And it's
Sure.
easy to say the right things and believe them. Not that like my faith wasn't real before. I'm not saying that at all. It has been and it was, but it just makes it that much deeper and to see who God is. Definitely.
So we're recording this around the holiday season. You got a Christmas tree behind you. So as people are watching this online, they'll understand, even though it might be after Christmas that this airs, we're recording this before Christmas. Tell me how you're doing as of right now, like going through that rehab. You get out of the place in mid-August, but I'm sure even now, as you mentioned, there's still some things and some challenges that you got to work through. So how are you doing today? You look fabulous and you sound great. So I have to imagine you're doing pretty well. So share how you're doing.
Yeah, still lots of challenges for sure. Functionally, I feel like I can manage with most things, but still lots of challenges. Still have lots of follow-up doctor appointments. I'm still in physical therapy. I'm in pool therapy to work with the muscles and joints too. I'm in vision therapy for all my eye issues currently too. And so lots of busyness and craziness, but kind of learning to manage too. And finally it's been quite a long time, but just finally I've been able to kind of start learning to walk independently without assistance. Before I needed a walker and heavily relied on that, heavily then relied on a cane. Was in a wheelchair for a few months. I want to say like 4 months actually. Yep, 4 months.
Yeah.
And so it's just been recently, but very thankful to be seeing progress.
How is Alex doing?
He's doing so well. Very, very thankful. He was critical too at the scene, but now he's doing so well. He's back to work. Just obviously we have our limitations of what we need to be careful with, but he's
Yeah,
doing so well.
that's great. And if people are watching this, they see you kind of bring your hand up and down, and there's a little ring on your left hand there. So you guys just recently got engaged too, right?
Oh yes, yes we did.
The 2020 is not so bad when you think about it. Congratulations.
And we're getting married yet here in 2020. We're going fast.
Oh, you're just pushing through. It's going to be the most memorable year ever. That's
I
amazing.
know. We got to end it right. So
You got to end it right. That's awesome. Well, congratulations.
That's awesome.
I'm so happy for you
So happy
guys.
for you guys.
As you look back
As you
at
look
everything that
back
you've gone
at everything
through,
that you've gone through,
what is God teaching you right now?
I'd say, I think I might have said this kind of before, but I think just kind of seeing who God is, regardless of the circumstance. It's easy to just kind of have your circumstances dictate your mindset and dictate like how you view God. But those things all aside, just kind of realizing God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And no matter what the trial, the circumstance, the joy, the heartbreak, like no matter what it is, God is still the same God. He's still faithful. He's still steadfast. He's still good. He's still all powerful. And just kind of seeing that, it's changed my life. And God is so good.
That's good to hear. What would be the last thing you would leave, like an encouraging note or message for those listening? And maybe it's somebody else who's going through a situation similar to yours, a family. We've had some different people on who have gone through some trauma, and maybe just some encouragement for them as we wind down here.
I'd say the biggest encouragement I could give is just to always trust God. Again, I think it's so easy to let fear, anxiety, worries control our minds, and get into weird like emotional states and frustration and anger. Those are natural human things that are easy to take over your life. But when you just focus on who God is, it changes everything. And so, yeah, trusting Him, no matter what comes your way. It's nothing is easy for anyone. Everyone always faces different trials. I'm not saying mine's the hardest. I mean, every single person handles something differently, and different trials are handed different people's ways at different times. It's just everyone faces something different. And just holding on to your faith, not letting that waver, I think is so crucial. And God has been so good and faithful to me. I can't say it enough.
Well, she is Olivia Ancil. Played tennis at Cedarville, and our friends at Cedarville were the ones who introduced us, so we thank them. We're big fans of Cedarville and all that they stand for and what they're doing, but we're also big fans of you and certainly your boyfriend, soon to be, well, I should say I keep calling him your boyfriend, but he is now your fiance, and by the time this airs, he will be your husband. So congratulations, Olivia. We're so glad you shared your story with us, and continued success, and we'll be praying for you. Hopefully everybody listening will be praying for a full recovery as well. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much again for having me.
And many thanks to Olivia Ancil, the former Cedarville University tennis player, Division II, for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum and sharing her absolutely incredible story. What an inspiration Olivia is to so many as she's battled and clawed her way back to where God has brought her to now. I mean, her and Alex were not expected to live. You heard her say that. And for them not only to be living, but to now be married. Olivia and Alex actually married in early December and are now husband and wife and thriving and being able to share their story. I mean, I'm guessing there was a point where Olivia probably wasn't thinking about being on some dude's podcast like mine and ours at Sports Spectrum to be able to share her story. But I hope 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 10 million people hear Olivia's story and hear how God is working in her and Alex's life. And you could just sense joy in her spirit as she was talking and doing this interview. I did not hear a single peep of anger, a single peep of, just being disgusted. Certainly, I'm sure she's had those moments, but the joy of the Lord is our strength, right? And you could sense that Olivia's strength comes from God. She's a real inspiration. I'm a big fan. I'm a card-carrying member of the Olivia Ancil fan club. There's no doubt about that. And I hope you guys are too after hearing her story. So we wish her and Alex, now husband and wife, nothing but the best going forward on their journey. And if you want to learn more about Olivia's story, you can certainly reach us here at Sports Spectrum. Jason@sportspectrum.com is my email, and I can send you some links. Cedarville has done an interview as well with her and posted some things on their website. So I'm certainly willing to get that to you guys as well if you want to email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. And lastly, whatever app that you're listening to this podcast on, could you do us a favor? Click the subscribe button so that you never miss an episode of our show. But then share this conversation. Share the story of Olivia Ancil with someone close to you. And let Olivia's story inspire someone else just as it is inspired. I'm guessing it's inspired you just as much as it's inspired me. So share her story with someone else if you could. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. Love you guys. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.